and welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. It is episode 107, and we are the Who Dat Jedi. With me, as always, is Dave and Fredo. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
And we have a special guest tonight, a friend of ours. And it's going to be a special show because this person has, like, for some ungodly reason, decided to watch all the Star Wars. And so we're going to get her take on it. But it is shoemaking extraordinaire, house float making, mask making, and the founder of the future weather reporters of New Orleans.
Right.
Welcome, Leslie, to our show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Yes, I did, for some ungodly reason, just decide to accidentally watch all of the movies in a very short span of time.
So we're going to get into that, why you chose to do that, what your favorites were, maybe hip you some stuff you need to watch next, or try to further indoctrinate you into the Star Wars stuff. But before we get into that, how's everybody's... well, first of all, we had our first kind of, I guess Chewbacca's was a couple weeks ago, but then we had Crew de Vue this past week.
Saturday.
Has anybody gotten, I know the three of us have gotten out to parades. Leslie, you guys been out to parades already?
Went to Chewbacca's and Boheme on Friday night. We worked all day Saturday, and we didn't finish working until after the parade had started. And I'm writing in Muses next week, so I'm trying to limit my crowd exposure to not get cooked before Muses rolls, because I would be very upset if I like 2 days before the parade. So I'm just trying to, we'll go out this weekend outside, and I'll probably still wear a mask.
Cool. Holy cow. Somebody yelling at us, or does everybody hear
Sounds
that
like
voice?
somebody's yelling at us.
In Spanish, maybe.
It's not me. I'll mute myself.
It might have been.
That was, or was it the ghost at Fredo's parents' house?
Do you have thin walls?
Do you have really thin walls? That was I thought it was. I didn't want to be rude on Leslie. Tell Jen to shut up.
Me. The dogs and Jen are 2 floors below. Like, I got the whole level up here.
That was so weird. All right. Well, and if it is a ghost, Fredo, I want it on camera. So.
I was just going to react, though, to one thing that you said, which is that a lot of people are self-quarantining. That is a thing that is going on. Like, I don't want to get sick right before I roll.
I mean, I put a lot of money and a lot of time into riding in this parade, and, you know, you're in close quarters on the float, so it's not like you can ride sick. And I wouldn't do that to other people anyway, but, you know, like, even if that were a thing. So it's not necessarily self-quarantining, but I'm being a lot more careful than I was during Omicron, or, you know, or pre-Omicron, I guess. Things had kind of gotten a little lax, and then for us, and then lax for us is probably strict for most people, and then with Omicron, we definitely got a lot more locked down, because for somehow, in some way, we still have not gotten COVID. So just kind of staying in that zone where I don't get sick before the ride, or I end up with like strep throat or a stomach virus, or just any other gross human.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, because at I guess Crew de Vue, Scott Colesby came out, and he was saying, you know, he was kind of touch and go as to whether or not to go out to parades and things like that, and he was like, he and I have been talking. It's like there's a lot of places on the parade route that you can stand. You don't have to be right in the thick of things. You can be on the neutral ground side and across the street and still see the parade, you know, really well, and not be amongst a gazillion people. So, you know, that's kind of the way Crew de Vue was. But oh my goodness, I felt like a sponsor at Crew de Vue. Like there were just nothing but college age kids. I felt like I was sponsoring a dance. It was.
And it's usually, I feel like that's definitely not the case with Crew de Vue. I think it's usually like a more older crowd, but maybe the older folks are staying in.
I don't know.
You know, or I guess we're the old people now.
Yeah. I am one of the old people. Get off my lawn. All right. Well, I tell you what, and let's hit us some trivia, get our brains wrapped around Star Wars, then we'll kick off this conversation. So, all right, Leslie, we're going to start with you
Okay.
because I got one here. This is kind of a softball. All right, so whose leg does Wicket the Ewok hug as a gesture of welcome to the tribe? This is in Return of the Jedi. Whose leg does Wicket hug as a gesture of welcome to the tribe? What's that?
Chewie's leg.
That's close. He actually hugs Han Solo's.
It's not close at all. It's a Wookiee and a person right there.
But they're they're BFFs. They're BFFs.
They are BFFs. Yes.
Maybe I'll give you another one here in a little bit. But okay, so for Dave, to you, who embarrasses Anakin with 2 big kisses in the hangar after his pod race victory?
I'd say his mom, Shmi.
It is his mother, Shmi Skywalker.
Yeah.
All right. So Fredo,
Yes.
who? Any Spanish ghosts right now? They sound.
Not yet. I have moved locations and spots. Maybe the ghosts go away. We'll see.
Well, and the other thing is, I know that Elfie uses her buttons to talk. I didn't know if she was like going nuts.
They're quartering off now.
All right.
She's not bilingual. Not yet.
So Fredo, who's disappointed to find out just a cloak hanging on a pole he thought had skewered Yoda's body? Who's disappointed to find just a cloak hanging on a pole he thought had skewered Yoda's body?
Oh, Yoda's body. That's the one that's going to trip me up. I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with R2.
R2 looking for Yoda's body. It was actually Emperor Palpatine or Darth Sidious. I never even thought that Yoda was insinuated as skewered by a pike. That's kind of dark.
Right.
All right. Well, to me, okay, I have the rule that I have to take the first one I saw, but I'm going to not take that one because it's a real softball. So I'll take the one below it. Who does Han Solo, before he is frozen carbonite, tell Chewbacca to look after? That's an even bigger softball. That would be Princess Leia. But okay, so I'll throw this one to Leslie one more time. So who describes death as forever sleep?
Yoda?
That is Yoda. There you go. Yep. That is Yoda.
Or a child, like.
All right. Well, cool. So, all right, everybody's brains warmed up for Star Wars. So I guess, so first of all, Leslie, I want to ask you, so full disclosure, you never saw any Star Wars stuff before you went on this venture?
I mean, I knew of Star Wars and that it was a universe, but as far as seeing a movie, not even like a minute of one, probably.
So were you one of those, people who put the meme on with Julie Andrews saying, "This is me not giving a crap about your big Star Wars movie"?
No, it was more of just, I was a competitive athlete as a child. And I think a lot of people get like introduced into Star Wars as a kid, usually, maybe, I don't know. And I guess my dad wasn't into it. And my brother was a Nintendo guy, and wrestling, like WrestleMania, the WWF, like all of that growing up was his obsession. It wasn't Star Wars. So I didn't have anybody to like draw me in. I'm a sci-fi geek in like every other way, shape, or form. Like I could kill somebody on some Battlestar Galactica trivia probably, and the X-Files and like all of these other things. I just never dabbled into Star Wars for not any particular reason.
So side question.
Did you know about...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, did you know about I Am Your Father?
Yes, I knew that much of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, I wasn't raised inside of a box, but like, everybody, I knew who Yoda was and that Luke Skywalker was a person, and that I knew who Darth Vader was. But now it's like one of those things, like my dad always says that he's a car salesman, that like when you buy a particular car, you start seeing that car everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and seeing how much of that, like if you, like we just got a Kia Soul, and we see Kia Souls everywhere because we're very aware of Kia Souls now. So it's like, even watching like other shows now, I'm seeing the Star Wars references that I've probably overlooked my whole life, just like sprinkled throughout things, which is going to be like interesting going forward to like all of these, like maybe small references. I can't think of a good example right now, but we were watching some non-sci-fi show the other day and I was like, oh, Star Wars. And Jen's like, you've probably been missing this forever and just not realized what it meant, and you just write it off, you know.
That's the thing that Brittany said when she was teaching English back in Nebraska, when talking about archetypes and things like this. But anyway, I can't remember exactly what the lesson was for, but she showed a picture of Chewbacca in a slide presentation, and the kids all went, Bigfoot. It's like, okay, but how do you, and to her, she's like, there's a lot of things that I haven't seen, but I still understand where they come from. It's like, I've never, so it's, she couldn't understand how.
Out Darth Vader,
right.
Without ever seeing the movie.
Now, a side question, who is your favorite WWF wrestler growing up?
I never had one. I liked Hulk Hogan as a kid, but my brother could definitely have his own podcast about like wrestling and stuff. Like that's his to this day. Like he stayed with me for multiple WrestleManias in town. Like
he and Scott Colesby could probably host that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So did you? So growing up, when you probably saw all the Star Wars geeks like Dave and Fredo and me, talking about it, did you ever feel like, what am I missing out on, or was it just out of sight, out of mind until just recently?
Or out of sight, out of mind. Okay. Like it was never I never felt like I was missing out on anything. I just didn't get it and I was okay with it. Like if that makes sense, that it's like, I don't understand. Like I'm just not that brand of geek, like it's fine. Like I have my own geekdoms. And now
I totally understand it because that's the way I was about Marvel. Of course, I was in my 40s, not a kid growing up. So I guess then what made you, and I'll let the other two guys ask questions too, but what made you decide now? Did you need an idea for a house float, or was it,
No, thankfully we got one out of it, but I think it was real cold those few weekends. We didn't feel like doing anything, not that we do anything anyway, and Jen was like, what are we going to watch? I've been bugging you to watch Star Wars. Let's watch all of them.
So she's a Star Wars fan?
I wouldn't say fan per se. I think she was just more surprised that I'd never seen them because I am into all of the other sci-fi things in life. And she was like, let's just do it. And I finally caved, essentially. So like on December 30th, we sat down and watched the first one. And then we just kept watching them. Got a whole lot of work done those few weeks we did that. We didn't. But.
And so you did it in release order, right? With like.
We did. I asked the Twitter first, and y'all told me that I needed to watch them in the. I think that's the only way to do it, really. I'm not, I guess, a purist in that sense. But like, why would you watch them in any other way than the way they were made?
So, pardon my coughing, but my argument is actually, and I think you must have ignored me on Twitter because I said, I agree with what they call the machete order, but a verified one where you start with episode 4, so A New Hope, then you watch Empire Strikes Back, so you get that big "I am your father" reveal.
Right.
Spoilers, everybody.
But I guess since I already do it,
but then you go back, and then you go watch episodes 1, 2, and 3. So you get the prequels as a flashback. So kind of Luke dealing with who his father is, and then you watch Return of the Jedi for the finale. And then 7, 8, 9, you can just do whatever. So
I loved 7, 8, 9. Those were my favorite.
Controversy. She's making controversy right off the bat, guys.
The last 3, right?
Yeah.
Loved them. But I think it's just more, maybe I'm showing my age, my millennialness or something. Like, I don't know. Like they were better to me.
No, okay. So
they're more like movies I'm used to watching, I suppose. Right?
I think this is awesome because again, it's like, they had me watch all the Marvel stuff, and I would come back and I would say, I didn't like Thor Ragnarok. And they like looked at me cross-eyed like, what is your problem? But I'm just like, and I wonder if watching them so close together affects that. And you also
Yeah, I mean,
you
it's
also
still
don't have any emotional
childhood feelings
tie-in, right?
tied to.
So
It's just like I'm watching these, like, and it's definitely I would say the last three are more like movies I'm used to watching
so
or have
is
been
it an
watching the
aesthetic
last couple
thing?
of
Is it
decades.
what did you like better about 7, 8, and 9? Was it the, well, like I said, was it the aesthetics, the special effects, or was it the
Aesthetics
story?
are better. I think the story too. I mean, maybe as a woman, like having a woman lead and like her being the, you know, I am woman, hear me roar, like the main character even being was probably maybe some of it. I don't know. I'm sure that was a big controversy, like if the onlines were a thing then. Uh, but no, I think the storyline was more cohesive then. Like I felt like the clones and that set, I was kind of confused in. Like it was like you started and you're like, what? For a good bit of it, I was kind of like, who are clones and why are we at war and why are they called that? Like it's just like all of a sudden you're in a clone war, and like I'm seeing this making Jen watch Battlestar Galactica right now, and like me who's watched the whole series like 3 times, I understand what's going on because I got the whole series as a context. So maybe it's like that with some of the movies. Like I've only seen all of them once, and I was real confused for like 2.5 of those 3s because I haven't watched them multiple times to like pick up on the nuances that you can see when you watch things repetitively, if that makes sense.
I did also say that the acting in the sequels is probably some of the best. The like they just mostly like across the board just crushed it in the sequel movies with Adam Driver and Daisy and John. They were great.
Oh, Adam Driver, that's the worst. That's the guy that's the worst. Like somehow Han Solo's kid ends up being a bad guy, like whatever. But like, yes, and it could be just the quality of the acting because it's not as deadpan. It's more motion driven, and that could be anything from the underlying scores that you're hearing instead of hearing like how music and film were intertwined back in the day compared to now. It's just completely different on like all of those levels.
But it does. I mean, it.
Go ahead, Fredo. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it does speak to a different level of movie making, and just from the standpoint, like when you think of the original trilogy, Lucas was thinking, movie serials from the 40s and 50s.
Right.
And then when he makes the original trilogy, he gets a chance to do whatever he wants, but he's kind of hampered by his own limitations. Whereas in this one, it's almost like you get the best of both worlds. You get writers and directors and actors who've all been influenced by Star Wars, making a Star Wars without necessarily being beholden to anything but what came before. So, but it's because I hadn't thought about just that standpoint of you're gonna get better quality actors, or or just simply more more solid quality all throughout. Whereas maybe in the other trilogies, stuff kind of goes up and down a bit more wildly. Although Rise of Skywalker, people have their own issues here or there.
Right.
So we'll we'll get into the Disney Plus shows as well, because I know you're one of the tweets that made me laugh was I think we try not to swear on this show so Dave doesn't have to edit out, but I think you said something like, what a D move that Luke had Grogu make, the choice between the lightsaber.
No, I think it said, I think, yeah, like, or that Luke Skywalker is still the effing worst, you know, like come on.
So
like I didn't like him from the jump. I don't know if I was supposed to like him or not, but
ooh, interesting. Okay, so so what I'm going to ask the big controversy is The Last Jedi. So episode 8, the one Rian Johnson directed, and a lot of people did not like the Luke Skywalker that was portrayed in The Last Jedi. I think it's been our contention that a lot of people think they have this vision.
He kind of lined up with how I thought he was, like just kind of being the worst.
Keep going with that. I'm gonna let you just go.
Island, or like wherever he was, this planet, and I'm gonna crawl. It was obviously in Ireland. It was gorgeous. I'd love to go to that set, or Scotland or somewhere.
I've been off the coast of that, so yeah.
I'm gonna run away and pout about it because wah wah. Like it's just like it's just the worst. Like I remember like the first movie, I'm like, are we supposed to like him? Like I didn't like. I think it was Brittany that said like, oh, well, you must be like my son and like Darth Vader. I'm like, I don't like him either. Like I'm not rooting for the bad guy, but I just never felt like he was like some champion I could get behind. Han Solo, maybe, yeah. But I don't know. He just felt entitled throughout the whole thing. And then like, I get his school or whatever was blown up, and people came. It sucks, you get all this like in a different movie, I think. But it's like are you a Jedi or not, man?
So
Balls
that,
up.
so that's the interesting thing here is that because this was a conversation from us in our podcast Twitter DM. It says who was it that Fredo shared the article why Luke isn't Return of the Jedi's true hero, and then I said the controversial thing. I said I said he's certainly acting in his own self-interest throughout the film. And I've always thought that, but it's like the Friends episode where Joey says no good deed is truly selfless. And I think the big argument was when I said the ultimate goal. However, what's the ultimate goal to Luke's hero's journey? It's not to defeat the Empire. It's to become a Jedi. So all the rebellion stuff is set dressing. It got us into this long conversation about how people have built up Luke to be the white knight come riding into town,
and
saving the day.
Me,
and
just like sporadic information growing up, like Luke's the good guy, he's the hero. So I go in with that expectation, and it was never met.
There's that word. Cool.
We'll bring that up a lot too. The other thing that it's interesting about what you've been saying here too is that I think a lot of people have talked about Star Wars and its future and the fact that it just seems so beholden to the Skywalker family, and like you gotta like sort of cut those ties at some point and move on from that, because people are really they're really attached to this universe and all the storytelling possibility that is there, and we're just going to show you one family. And I think like a lot of people are kind of ready to move on to new things, and that's what we're seeing now with the new television shows where you see The Mandalorian, though again Luke shows up again,
and he's still the worst. I think that's interesting, right? Is it a universe or is it a series built around the Skywalkers? And I think it is a universe, because I don't think those last 3 movies that I liked, I guess he showed up at the end or whatever, but it wasn't about him. It was about the other people's journey through the universe. And it's almost like they have I think time doesn't really matter. Like the order of events and like what they decide, what story they decide to tell can be from any time in the universe, before the first movie or after the last, or somewhere in between, and it's a unique thing. It's kind of how Marvel gets away with like people who are dead and still being in movies or whatever. But like time isn't important, because it's, as we all know, like there's always going to be an enemy in the universe. Like it's never like going to be a utopia. So there's always going to be a story to tell and heroes to be made.
So I saw this meme this morning in my Facebook memories, and it's the Rick and Morty, USOB, right? It says, referencing The Rise of Skywalker, said, when you leave the cinema and realize J.J. Abrams ended the entire Skywalker saga on Palpatine successfully using love to manipulate, corrupt, hurt, or kill every single Skywalker across 3 generations, ultimately resulting in the total eradication of the Skywalker, Solo, and Amidala bloodlines, while Palpatine's heir lives on and claims Skywalker name and legacy.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that meme, but it's spot on. I mean, so... all right. So watching all this, what was your favorite? Who was your favorite? What are your favorites? What are your favorite character, and what's my favorite moment that made you go yeehaw?
I really enjoyed the Ewoks.
Controversy all over this podcast, folks. All right, keep going.
I enjoyed their presence because their dogs look kind of like Ewoks. Well, Sabrina looks like a Wookiee. Elfie looks like an Ewok.
I always liked Ewoks too.
They didn't say words, and they just kind of ran around and chitter chattered, and I thought they were cute. But I thought that all of like their celebration ceremonies at the end of things were very hokey. And weird. It's like all of these people just died, but let's have a weird luau. Like,
Just don't look too close in the pot.
like it was definitely like the Ewoks were cute. I mean, Chewie's the best. I don't understand. I like that you didn't have to understand how the characters understood each other. Like I don't like whoever understood R2D2, and it's like sure that was 3 sentences long out of 3 beats, like, but we don't need to know how they interpret all of that information. So I thought that was fun because it definitely just cuts through a lot of the Doctor Who, for example, like like when you enter into the telephone booth, you all of a sudden understand all languages. It's like you didn't need all that. Everybody spoke English or could interpret on their own, and there wasn't a magic pill you had to take. I don't know, it was a random thing. I enjoyed just how bad the bad guys were. Like bad at being bad for one. Like they weren't that great at being evil, but somehow they got like real far in their evil journeys. But also just like what little Darth goes and slaughters a village just because he was mad one day, goes back and like Padme like wants to marry him, which I still am just hung up on.
That's a really
there was no nothing. It was like fade out. Oh, I just murdered everybody, and she's hugging him, and it's like we're married in a palace. And I'm like, what happened between there? Did they have a conversation about maybe his morals? And then people were surprised when he went evil. Like the warning signs were there.
That's a real problematic scene. That is one of those like where, he slaughters a bunch of Tusken Raiders, and and her comeback is, it's human to be angry. It's like,
sure.
So
sure. I mean, I get mad. I take a walk.
This reminds me of conversations I have with our daughter. It's like it's okay to have those feelings. But you don't. Not okay to slaughter a village.
Right. There's a good happy medium between slaughtering a village and
Though Dave, I did hear you tell your son, there's a reason she kicked you in the face. I did hear that.
That was one of my favorite parts. I would say I was more impressed in the graphics in the first 3 movies than I thought I was going to be. Like I was prepared to see some bad stuff, like just bad graphic wise. And I was like, well, this isn't. And I since learned that they've updated it all since then, like with some kind of weird technology or whatever. But
in places, a lot of the places, it's just they made things brighter. I mean, there's it's very obvious where they fixed it in the special editions, but I mean, a lot of it is very similar to what it was. I have a question for you because you mentioned you really dug Rey in 7, 8, and 9 because we had we had a female lead, and by the way, I think my top Star Wars moment. I think when we had our episode on that is when the lightsaber goes into Rey's hand in The Force Awakens, from the snow. That is just with the music in there. It's just one of the top moments. But we have talked about this as 3 dudes, and so it'll be good to get a female perspective on this. Is that in the prequels, we thought Padme was really. It was just really awful what they did to that character, because here you start off with this. I'll give you my premise and then you can go with it. Here you start off with this young, strong queen and then senator. And then by episode 3, she's combing her hair saying, Anakin, just hug me like you did on Naboo, and just becomes this. It's like they just totally made her into, I don't know. They like took every bit of strength out of her character.
A couple of things, like the snarky part of me wants to say like toxic men can do that to you, because they definitely can. If like she's in a relationship with this dude who obviously has some issues, but she wants to love and take care of, and it ends up just draining all of who she is out of her. That's one part of it, I think, and the other part is like, I don't know, that just happens in TV, especially to female characters, I think a lot, they had to have something to do with her, and I don't think they knew what to do with her. because she wasn't going to be the queen. So like, well, what is she now? And then like, oh, well, let's just make her like. I still don't understand why she died after having kids.
Nope.
Like,
Broken heart.
A broken heart.
oh, but come on, she just had 2 babies. Like, who does that? Like, I'm just so sad. What? Like,
You know, there's a
I think it was,
fan
like-
theory that Palpatine sucked the life out of her.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't
So,
heard
I
that,
don't
and that's
know.
dumb. But
No.
Eh,
You know, but here she is, like having 2 children, and just goes womp womp. Like, I just and had C-section. She didn't have to do with the real, you know. Like, come on.
well, you know,
I think that's a good point.
go ahead, Fredo. You're on.
I was going to say, I think that's a good point because it highlights, I mean, like, it seems like when you look at the prequels that Padme's ultimate role in Fate was to deliver Luke and Leia into the
Well,
world.
She has the kids, and we don't know what to do with her outside of that, so she's gonna die.
Exactly. And that really highlights kind of some of the limitations in the writing, which, again, has never been like the highest of highs. It's, whether it's from its sources or whatever. But it also does, I think, juxtapose it against Rey as to how much more importance they put on her character as to knowing some kind of way where she was going to be and where all the controversy came between episodes 7 and 9 as to J.J. Abrams building, oh, she's got a big mystery background. Ryan Johnson saying, nope, there's not such thing. And then J.J. coming back saying, but yes, there is.
Yeah, I think I ran through like 18 different scenarios on like whose kid she could be, and I think I ran out, and now I don't even know what's real. Like, it's definitely this, it's definitely this, it's definitely this. And Jen's like, would you just watch the movie? Because I'd pause it and be like, what if? And she's like, oh my God, stop. Like, just watch. So, because they are longer movies, and so we would stop and then pick up the next day. So we had a very young puppy at the time who was pretty needy and barking at us. And
What did
So you condense
you made mention
2 years of nerd.
you made mention of how like Attack of the Clones, all of a sudden you're in the Clone Wars, like why are we there, stuff like that. The prequel storyline is very heavily into space politics.
Right.
Where was that on your annoyance scale? From 1 of I understood why it was politics to 10, it annoyed the junk out of me and get politics out of my Star Wars.
I mean, I'm a Battlestar Galactica fan, and half the show is space politics, or like not space politics, but like if you know, it's a lot of politics. And I don't know if it was even on my radar. I was just there for the show, I think it was until I was a few in and I was really like checked into it all. I think I was just like, for those first 3, absorbing the universe, for lack of a better word. Who's who? How does this work? How do people relate to each other? So maybe it was a good thing that it kind of like spelled some of it out for me. But yeah.
So, okay, then here's another question, and guys, you can answer. So you have 3 big Star Wars nerds right here. What questions do you have that are still unanswered that we could help you with?
I was thinking about this because you like prepped me like, this is what we're going to do. Like, I don't know if I have any questions per se. It's like that. Questions. I mean, why was Padme the way she is? And we addressed that,
Well, how about if we get into we transition to the Disney Plus stuff, because I think there might be some questions there, because there's some other things that happen. So you watched also The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. Okay. So what did you think of those? I guess we'll call it that series. So The Mandalorian season 1, 2, and
Boba Fett became The Mandalorian because Jen and I joked that 3 episodes into the Boba Fett that people were like uninterested, so they just brought Mando back. That's our theory. I was very impressed that a show with a guy who doesn't have a face with The Mandalorian was able to like draw me in as much as it did. So like that's got to be due to the writing and to the story itself. For that, like you're not, it's literally a helmet talking and acting through most of the show, but like we're like glued to the TV, like what's next, right? I mean, obviously Baby Yoda, even though it's not Yoda, you know. Grogu was a huge draw there. And the armorer, she was hot, even though you couldn't see her face, which I can't understand. Like I still can't just. It's like it's weird. I have a crush on the armorer, and it's like she doesn't have a face to me. Like I don't get it. But yeah, that's why I tell Jen my crush on that one Mandalorian. Whatever. But then the Boba Fett stuff,
I thought it would be Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan. That
obviously, listen, I think Jen gets it now about like, yeah, obviously that Mandalorian too, right? But yeah, like it's they do so well edited of doing like flashbacks and this and that as far as Boba Fett goes. And it's even like I give a lot of credit to scores and stuff in shows that like the second you hear, you know it's Mando coming up, or you know it's going to be Boba Fett by like what kind of weird music starts playing. Is it the Western music, or is it this music, or is it, you know, and like they do such a good job of humanizing the characters that we haven't seen the human side of, whether like they're human or not. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
We don't have these supernatural, all-powerful wizard people.
Right, it's just people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like that's a lot more relatable for a lot of people, and that's sort of how Star Wars started, really. Like the episode 4, you had a little bit of the Jedi stuff, but it was sort of sprinkled in.
It was more like just a bunch of dudes and a chick, but like and a Wookiee like getting together and like saving the galaxy, as opposed to like it being so dependent on the superpower or the Force.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to say, I'm just going to judge my own opinion in here, and that I think that the Jedi's biggest downfall was that they tried to sever all like connections to other people and stuff, because how can you do that, right? Like you want to be like, oh, the protector and blah blah blah, the Force, but like you gotta love folks, you gotta have connections, I think that was Luke's biggest thing, that he tried so hard not to have connections that he never made any meaningful ones, and he just ended up kind of being an monkey at the end of the day because of it.
And that's where I think that if I might interject for a second, I think the Mandalorian, and of course at the end of Book of Boba Fett, I think we're going to be taken down that path because, you know, Luke made Grogu choose, but Grogu's going to keep you. And so you have the Jedi, like you said, of no connections, and you have the Mandalorians where everything's about your clan. And like the whole story, we've talked about this especially in the Book of Boba Fett, it was all about finding your family and finding belonging. And so now you've got Grogu who has to choose between those two. And it's like that meme of, you know, little girl going, why can't we have both? And I think with Din Djarin having the Darksaber, there might be a little bit of that might come into play.
And like,
but I've been wrong many times, so.
The point to say, like, it's already like he's been trained and he's just remembering. So who's to say he can't keep remembering with the Mandalorian? Listen, I've never been so excited for a little tiny animatronic device to like jump onto a piece of metal, you know, in my life. That like Jen and I are both like crying, like, oh God, they're together again. You know, like, like he had to choose that path. Like the whole time, we're like, there's no way. You know, like spoiler alert, everybody, but like hopefully everybody's seen it at this point. It's been a week. Like how could he not? But it's like, you can see that you can't be the good guy without any human connection, in my opinion, or any, not even human, but like any meaningful relationships, because that's what makes us better ourselves. You can't just like have a lightsaber and like talk to the trees, you know.
And it does reinforce your point about Luke Skywalker being the worst.
Right, you know, like if he would have been able to nurture some of those relationships, or maybe get some good therapy to, you know, deal with being separated from his sister and then kissing his sister and having a crush on her, and you know, that whole weirdness through it all, you know, he might not have been the worst at the end.
Let's talk about that a little bit, okay? Because so you knew that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father going in. Right. Did you know that Luke and Leia were brother and sister?
I did not.
Okay, so when you get to that point in Return of the Jedi, as a not 10-year-old kid, what was your thought at that point?
Yeah, because I mean, it's not his fault. He didn't know, you know. But then it's like, why'd they do that to him? Like, did the writers not think it out? Because it wasn't like a flirt, like he like smooched her, and like was definitely like lusting after her for like a good portion of all this, and then like you find out they're sisters, and it's like, I mean, I expected him to be a bad guy at that, because like, I mean, what do you do with that information? Like,
Yeah, that'll send you over the edge, right?
like it's weird. Like, ugh. Like, you kissed your sister, but then like you just move on, and then all that. But obviously they had a connection, so I guess you were supposed to go that route with it. But then you're not allowed to have connections. I don't know. It all gets very convoluted very quickly. But yeah, the whole kissing your sister thing was a little weird.
I have to share one of my all-time favorite movie-going experiences was I went to the Empire Strikes Back with my sister. The re-release in the 90s. The movie came out. Everybody knew everything. You know what's coming. And the moment with the kiss shows up, and the entire theater, ew. And it was like, yes, golf clap that, because it was just perfect.
Yeah, because I didn't know, so I was like, oh, well, they're both like, I thought it was going to be like a love triangle, and then I'm like, ooh, like,
It's
automatic win for Han Solo, but like, ooh.
It's like all of a sudden we're in Dukes of Hazzard. So let's go back to Mandalorian, especially Mandalorian season 2, because we get a lot of characters added in. Bo-Katan, the Katie Sackhoff character, Ahsoka, from the Jedi, the one who Rosario Dawson played.
Steel ears, whatever. What do they call them?
Yeah. Who else did we have in throughout that season, guys? Hey, do you know anything?
Lady.
Do you know anything about those characters since?
I don't, besides what's in the shows, right? But besides, like, I don't, I guess there's probably stories, comics, this, that, whatever, like with, I guess canon and everything for Star Wars, but all I know is like what I've seen. So I would like to go back to the Mandalorian War. I think that would be an interesting movie to watch.
So what did you think about the Jedi Ahsoka? Rosario Dawson's character, that one where we find Grogu's name. Besides the fact that it was really cute.
I liked her. I didn't dislike her character. I thought she did a decent job, especially like I guess in the last Boba Fett couple episodes where she's talking to the Mandalorian and being like, it's gonna be harder for him, and she seems to respect connection more than the rest of them do. But like, she also, I don't know, I didn't hate her.
There's a long background with that character, because she's been in the animated shows.
See, I haven't seen any of that. No.
Yeah.
Well, and see, that's what we're going to talk about is your summer homework. And Dave, keep going, but keep going down this trail that you're.
There was a animated movie that came out, which was fairly derided at the time when it came out, and it was called The Clone Wars, and then they spun off a series off of that, and it ran for a lot of episodes.
7 seasons,
yeah. And she was one of the principals in that, and she was Anakin's like Padawan. She was his sidekick, and so that's her background. And so there's a lot to mine there. If anybody's interested in that character, they can go down that road. And then she shows up again in the animated series Rebels, which is set between episode 3 and episode 4.
So Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope.
Yeah, that whole time period. And I think a lot of people think that series is even better than Clone Wars was. And it's shorter. It's easier to digest. That's the one I would recommend to anybody that's like, I like the Star Wars stuff, and I think I would like to watch more of it. Then I would say Rebels would be a really good.
But what I like about Leslie's answer was that it's clear that you maybe don't have to do the homework, because she got. And it's a credit to how that character was written in The Mandalorian. that you don't need to do the homework to appreciate what the character was conveying and what and
Jen and I have talked about too that you could pick up and watch The Mandalorian without seeing a single Star Wars movie. I think. Like, I think it could be like, oh, you'd have questions, and I think that's the point. I mean, Disney's a multi-billion-dollar company for a reason, right? There's like, let's hook these people with the show, and then they'll watch all the movies, and then get all the gear, and then go to the parks and do all those things. But like, you can, Mandalorian works as a standalone. Maybe not Boba Fett, but like Mandalorian, you could start the first episode and it would take you a couple episodes, like any new TV show, I think, to like get your bearings and figure out like who does what is this, what is that. But I think any new series that you start watching does that to you in general, and I think it works as a standalone for that reason. That like they.
And so I take it you didn't. I take it you didn't from the way you've been talking. You didn't really dig as much the Book of Boba Fett until we got to the Mandalorian stuff.
But I think was a direct correlation that we have watched everything. So like Jen said, we didn't have to wait a year or whatever to get Boba Fett. But we just finished the Mandalorian like 2 weeks ago. So we're still like everything right about them is very, very fresh to us, as opposed to maybe not giving Boba Fett the space it needed to stand and shine on its own, because we just finished probably 2 weeks ago or whatever the second season of The Mandalorian.
Well, and many of us were, like I said, like about 10 years old when we first saw Boba Fett on screen, and he only has about 2 minutes of screen time, and he has like 2 lines, and it was the coolest dang looking character ever. And we had our Star Wars toys, and we made up all sorts of. It was the character you knew the least about,
but you got to make up the most about.
And so when it was like the Book of Boba Fett's coming out, it was like really. I mean, a lot of people were nerding out because we finally get something out of here.
But you were disappointed.
You didn't have 30 some odd years of waiting for something about Boba Fett, so you were kind of, it sounded like I said, a little bored up until. A little bit,
yeah. I mean, I would like, what's this? What's that? But like the best part was him in the desert. Like, loved all of that stuff. Could care less what was happening in the city.
Yeah. Yeah, I tended to agree with that. Like, I liked seeing his background with the Tuscans.
Yeah. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, amazingly shot, amazingly like acted, and again, Tuscans don't have faces. So like, I mean, to the fact that like that was what was captivating about the series to me is a testament to the writing, the editing, the directing, all of that, as opposed to the stuff with human faces. Like I thought the kids on the Harleys was cute or whatever, but like, and the girl that's in all of the or the woman that was in, oh shit, what's that show? I don't know, the
Ming-Na Wen.
Ming-Na Wen. Yeah.
Talking about, like, it's just words left my brain for a second, but like that was much more interesting, like his background on like how he became, and I mean, obviously he was a person before then, but that was the cool. Like I noticed myself not on Twitter and like really paying attention during those scenes, and maybe like playing with my phone during some of the others. As far as the Boba Fett goes, I have a question for y'all. Do I get to ask questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go forward.
Okay, so how do y'all feel about the fact that Star Wars gets to kind of get away with so much violence? And here's my theory. So I think that they get to use pew pew sounds instead of bullets, and that all of the bad guys look like robots, even though there's people inside of their outfits. That they got. I mean, there's a very violent series. If you look at it, like if there was blood and guts coming out of, the stormtroopers or whoever, or the fact that like the Death Star was full of however many people and this and that, like how do you feel about like that level of violence? Because it's supposed to be like a kid-friendly show, but like that's my theory, is that they're not bullets and everybody's in a costume, so it doesn't feel real.
See, now I said so. I brought this up last week on our episode
Look,
because
it's not even spoiled.
No, you're fine. You're fine because that one of the last scenes in Book of Boba Fett when Ming-Na Wen, when Fennec Shand is going in and lynches the mayor and knifes all the people, and and there was a lot of violence. And it seemed more violent. My premise was that it was like this has been more violent, and even from the Mandalorian, the Disney Plus stuff is far more violent than the movies. And I think you are right. I think that there is when the stormtroopers don't have a face. Even when Ben Kenobi is sliced down by a lightsaber in episode 4, he just disappears. So you don't see pain. You don't see the only time you really get that in the original trilogy is when Luke's hand gets cut off.
Right.
So I think you're right. I mean, it's.
I think it's fine. I would rather not subject children to. It's still violence, but I think that they almost dumb it down in a way.
But it's also
even calling them clones. Like clones are people too, right?
Oh, you need to watch the Clone Wars. You need to watch the Clone Wars episodes now. But
they used to. I wanted to jump in briefly. They used to focus group the heck out of this stuff. Like George Lucas, who created all this, he was obsessed with like not upsetting children.
Oh yeah, I think that they did a fantastic job.
Yeah. But like to your point, it's like I think like almost every creative decision had that in mind when they originally created this whole thing. It's like, well, we're not going to use real bullets. We're going to use laser beams. Yeah, and the bad guys are going to have terrible aim, and it's such bad aim that it'll become a joke. That everyone will joke that the bad guys have bad aim. So there were a lot of things that were sort of placed in there to sort of make kids feel like okay about things. Okay, we're going to be okay. The heroes are going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And it's
the
really
bad
sort of
guy being in a mask for most of it, right? It's not really until you start to see Darth Vader's humanity or his good side that you even see his face, really. Interacting as anything, or even like with the other ones, like you don't ever see their face unless they're like attempting to be good or being challenged to be good. When they're bad, they put their mask on. So like, or helmet, or what, I don't know what the proper term is, but you know what I mean? Like they cover their face to be bad. So I'm sure this group, or psychologically, that's a thing too. You're hiding the bad parts of yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, because the ones that thinking back to the original trilogy, the one who's really the most kind of brutal, menacing, actually going through is Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Whether he's choking somebody or force choking them, or but it's almost like, okay, he's allowed to do that because he's the bad guy, kids. You don't do what the bad guy does.
And he was in all black, and then
right.
all of this, like we've watched enough television in our lives to know like these things are planned out. But I just Ben and I have talked just about how the level of violence is there, but it's not bloody. It's not. It's childlike violence is actually the word that.
However, I will say that the old geeks really adore the Vader hallway scene from at the end of Rogue One, where he's slicing down all the rebel troopers and just because that's the thing that we all. It was Darth Vader was evil, but you never. You saw him choke a few people here and there, but we made him even more evil by playing with our action figures, because we see what his potential was, and then to actually see that was kind of a geek moment. So, but even then, that's it's filmed really dark, and it's and you're doing fantastical things. It's not like. Again, I don't like movies like I have no interest in watching The Sopranos, for example, because I don't want to see mob hits. Like I don't want to see somebody's guts being blown out or a head being blown off. That has historically bothered me.
You like to sleep at night.
But to see Darth Vader slice down a rebel trooper, no problem. Because it's fantastical, right? It's you're right. It's not of this world.
That's a thing that in our house we do. Like we watch this or that, and generally like we got to go off world is what she says. Like she's like, I need something that's not on Earth, where because then it's not real, and then it's not whether it's finishing a Star Wars movie or watching an episode of this. Like, so it's definitely like, she's like, gotta go off world, because if it's not on Earth, it won't like mess her up in her head as bad, you know, like as far as sleep and things go.
So do you like video games?
I'm not I played Pokemon on my phone there for a bit, but I'm not a video game person.
So it was kind of interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, I needed something to do, and I was like, I'm going to play my Xbox again. And I have a game in there called The Force Unleashed, and the first level is Darth Vader walking through and slaughtering Wookiees. And yeah, and I stopped halfway through, and I told the guys, I said, I need to get a Switch. I need to play some Mario. I can't. It's like the beginning of the pandemic.
That's like
slaughtering Wookiees, can't do it. You know, it's like, yeah. So I had to go. And then I got a Switch. I just got a Switch and I played Mario, and I was so happy because it was like, it was off world.
I've altered my own consumption of pop culture since the pandemic started, because it's just like, yeah, reality's hard enough. I don't need to wallow in things. I'm with you. Let's go off world.
Yeah, like because we were watching some other weird show I found on Amazon, and then we found out that we never get a conclusion for it, but it was like alien still kind of, but like it was on Earth, and like she's like, I recognize those city names, and you know it's humans, it's this, and she's like, we gotta go off world. I'm like, okay. So
we didn't ask you about how about Rogue One and Solo.
Solo is the only one I have not watched.
Oh, okay. And
I feel like I'm just like it's.
So you're gonna watch that now, and you're gonna come back on and let us know what you thought. So anyway,
I will.
But go ahead.
I can't. Like I could talk about. I'm a dork. I can talk about these kind of things for forever. But like like it's almost like one of those deals where like that's the last new thing I have, so I'm like saving it.
Yeah, like for a rough weekend or
right, or it's like for a series that you've watched, like with me and Battlestar Galactica, I've watched the whole series like 3 times, but I don't always watch the last episode because that means it's not over. Like I know how it ends, but like you don't have to watch it and like get sad about it or whatever. Like I don't want to have nothing to watch that's new, so I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's like for a bad day.
So how about Rogue One? I did
enjoy Rogue One. I felt like Rogue One was a little long. I feel that about most movies though, because I'm very ADD. And didn't think I liked movies for a long time, and now that I've watched 10 or so movies within a couple of weeks, she's definitely eaten her words on that. But I liked Rogue One. I definitely feel like it.
Did you watch that before Episode 4?
I watched at the very end.
Okay, and that might be why, because I could see that point because it seems like an extension, a front extension, if you will, of that movie.
And I kept having to be like, when is this? Like what point in time are we at right now? In the the grand timeline. It was a great standalone movie. That was one of those I do think you could, and maybe it's one of those things like I didn't need a refresher course on some of the stuff because I just watched all other 9 movies. That like it felt maybe redundant. I don't even remember. Maybe we were busy that week or I hadn't taken my medicine. Who knows? I liked it, but like it was one of those by then, like everybody was like, oh my God, Rogue One is amazing. You're going to love Rogue One. That like, I was like, all right, Rogue One, let's do this. And it just, because I hadn't had to wait 10 years for a new Star Wars movie, I had to wait like 4 days or like whatever. It wasn't as like, whoa, this is the best movie ever.
Thor Ragnarok, guys. Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like I didn't have to sit and wait for new material or like it wasn't. And that's the only thing, and that's the thing where you can kind of get more honest reactions for people or more pure reactions of like, I didn't have to sit around and wait. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about binging things versus like watching them when they come out released. Like, I'm not for watching anything as it released at this point. Like, I hate it. Like, I'll just wait till the end of the season of something and just watch the whole season because I have no self-control or patience or anything like that. To like just have to wait a whole week to watch a show like that's so. I think that the Rogue One, like the awesomeness of it was because there was probably a gap or there was, and like I just watched the last Star Wars movie 3 days ago. Why is this so awesome?
So we got to talk to you about crafting, right? Before we let you go.
Okay, sure.
Like
but I have your I don't have your family shoe yet or yours done, but your shoe is done for your family. I'll get one.
Oh, Well, you never have to do such things.
Well, you
but-
know what I mean. I mean, y'all
Yeah.
are obviously getting Star Wars shoes. I have 5 prepped at this point. I'm in
See,
my
that's the thing, right? So to like some of our listeners are out of area, so they're
yeah.
not familiar with the whole Mardi Gras thing and like what goes into all of this. And so you're part of a crew that decorates shoes.
shoes, yes. High
Yeah.
heel shoes mainly, but also any kind of shoe you want. And I feel like probably it's one of those things like this has evolved as well. Like back when they first started throwing shoes, it probably wasn't as extravagant as they are at this point in time, 20 something years later.
Are you
No, it's
saying
like-
that eventually the cabbages on St. Patrick's Day are going to have bedazzled
Right, I mean, it's
sparklies?
because I even remember saying I've been in New Orleans either 9 or 10 years today, actually, was when I moved to New Orleans, I think 10 years ago. And from when I moved here to how things coming off of floats are now are still drastically improved. Or even 4 or 5 years ago, I got a lava lamp. I was like, I didn't even know this was a thing. And now, the lava lamps have like 3D animatronics, not really, but like everything is like just getting so. I think it'll peak at some point. There's only so much you can do with a shoe or this or that, but I mean, it definitely takes some work and effort. I think it's something you gotta love doing. Like I love making things in general, using my hands and being creative, and it's one of those things that, especially with a person with ADHD, that it's like I get an instant reward. Like I finished the thing. I don't have to finish them all at once. I finish a shoe and it makes you feel good. Like it's like a rush in a way. It's like oh, this is done and it's pretty and shiny or whatever, and woo. And like being on the receiving end of it, of like something that someone handmade. Like I've spent a month and a half getting glitter in every nook and cranny of the house. Worth it, but also messy, and I don't know. It's like something I think a level of pride goes into it.
Now you mentioned you've made some Star Wars shoes, but it's not all Star Wars shoes that you made. Where do you find your inspiration? Like, you got a shoe. What do you look to?
I mean, I'm in some Facebook groups, about like just like with local like New Orleans glittering people. It's really whatever I'm into at the moment. So I was in a different crew and we decorated a different thing years ago, and I was really into Wicked that year. The Broadway musical Wicked. I have a dog named Elphaba. So that's how into the Broadway musical Wicked I was.
That's why we have you on here. You're a nerd like us. Yep, there you go.
And so whatever I'm into at the moment is kind of what comes out. So I made tons of Wicked stuff, and I made my own little like defy instead of like defying gravity. And it was more like a political protest of defy with the witch's face instead of defy gravity, which is in the music. It was my own little take on Wicked. And I was also into... we were watching the new Sabrina. We also have a dog named Sabrina. So, here we are. And I made the praise Satan stuff, like, because it's very interesting, but it's like, I don't praise Satan, but like the Book of the Beast and like all of these things. Like, so like whatever I'm into at the moment just comes out in my crafts. And there's no like, I really like king cake. I have a handful of king cake shoes. Unicorns are fun and they were kind of easy to do. So I made about 10 of those. So, what's ever in my head, it's real hit or miss with people. Sometimes it's genius. Sometimes it's very mediocre.
So how long does it take you, the process, to do all that from, say, when you start working on it? Yeah.
I mean, it's time consuming in the sense that like you can't do it all at once because things have to dry. And things have to be flipped over and the bottom has to be done. And then you have to seal the glitter where you don't destroy other people's homes. And then you have to add on the things. So I'd say like probably 3 days for like each, but you do multiple at a time. So I'll do batches. I'll do like 5 of this. I'll do them all in each different stage. And just like with drying times and depending on how humid it is, which is definitely, I have less of a challenge in this house than I did our old house that was in that basement that was never dry. So
now I want to shift to kind of staying on the same track here, but just a little bit different topic, because you guys did something amazing at the beginning of this pandemic, and that was, I think you supplied most of New Orleans with masks.
I did most of.
Can you talk about? I mean, I know every mask that with the exception of my Boba Fett mask, every single other one we have is from you guys.
We don't want to get sued by Disney.
Well,
So
that's
we don't.
I
Yeah.
would understand that. But what can you walk us through how that whole thing?
That was probably one of the, so everybody else experienced the end of the world, right? We didn't. Um, we were tinkering with some sewing machines. I was like, let's make some masks because, like, what else are we going to do? We're bored. Like, we're creatives. We have to keep busy. We didn't really know what our life was going to look like. And everything was so new. So it was Mardi Gras. And like, I feel like New Orleans obviously was the start of the pandemic, but we also ignored the pandemic. Like, I remember my friend in Chicago messaging me and being like, hey, have you looked into this COVID or coronavirus thing? And I was like, it's fine. I'm at a parade. And then, like, 2 weeks later, everything was different, right? That'll change everything. Somebody listen to this will understand that. So, like, well, what are we going to do now? And we had a couple old sewing machines. A friend gave us another one, and we were just tinkering around. And we're like, we could make some masks. Like, let's start donating them. And that's where we started. And then we're like, we also have bills to pay, and we're on a photography studio. And when there's a pandemic, you can't really photograph people's faces, and and like that could help pay our bills. And we had the very unique opportunity of already having a website, having Square set up, all of these things that a lot of like probably crafters didn't.
Yeah, you
Right?
already had
Because
the
of our business.
e-commerce side set up. Okay.
Yeah, set up, and the ability to ship. We had all of that stuff, like a shipping vendor and yada yada, and could ship out of the house already. So we were like, yeah, we picked out a good few fabrics and we put them on the website, and I hit tweet. 2 hours later, the CDC and Nola Reddy, I think, sent out a message. Masks are recommended. So remember, back then you couldn't go to CVS and buy a mask. Nowhere had masks. And I'm not talking about the paper kind. I'm talking, like, you can buy a mask like on the corner at this point. Back then you couldn't. And initially we set out like maybe we'll do 50 or 100 masks in a week. That's fine. And I hit tweet, and the good people of New Orleans hit retweet. And within 48 or 72 hours, we'd sold like 700 masks. We're only two people. We slept in shifts. And that's what I mean by, like, we didn't experience the end of the world like everybody else did. Like, we were getting a few hours of sleep a night. We hired out our makeup artist to come into the other half of the double that we also inhabited and just cut fabric for us, because cutting's half the battle with sewing. We invested in 2 new sewing machines because the ones we had were old and didn't really work that well. And we had a couple people that we had photographed that we knew were in the service industry that would come and pick up fabric from us and take it to their house, cut it, bring it back to us, like no contacts and everything. And our styles have evolved from, the beginning one we made, but I think up to date, we've made almost 7,000 masks.
Wow.
Mostly hand sewn or not hand sewn, but like sewn by the two of us. We had hired out a couple extra seamstresses like here and there. Both of our moms helped out because we donated a whole bunch too. At the beginning, we wanted to be like Bob's for masks, right? Like every mask donated, every mask bought will donate. We quickly realized that we are not Bob's and not a multi-million-dollar company with a production team and warehouses and all of these things. So we took that down after, but we still have donated a couple thousand masks, probably to schools, to whoever needed them. We mailed a bunch of up to Minneapolis last year. Whoever needed them, we mailed some like just to whoever. Like somebody send us a message and be like, so and so needs some mask, and we just stick them in the mail. So yeah, weird times. Yeah. That was that.
Like I said, that
the
was
Star Wars mask for us, but that's because we don't want to get sued by Disney. No copyrighted masks. That's why we don't have Saints masks. We don't have anything that is copyrighted material because that doesn't matter how small you are, they will come after you.
I want to ask
family
one
and stuff. I would sew up a mask here and there. With like my dad got some Alabama masks because I felt like that was the only way he'd wear them. If they said like roll tide on them,
That's fair. I understand that. So. I did want to ask you though, like the throws that you make, like the hand stuff, like people who've been to Mardi Gras, they've seen like the beads, they've seen the trinkets, like the handcrafted stuff is the stuff that is really sought after by people. They're like, oh my gosh, that's what I want. And so like I wanted to know, just like, and I don't know, this might be a trade secret. I wanted to know how many that you like sort of designate for like friends and family and people,
So
and
those
how
don't
many
go on to the float with me.
Right.
So, like I say that, like I'm gonna make y'all Star Wars shoes. I'm not gonna try to find y'all on the route.
right.
I'm not gonna let that go into like those. I'll see you when I see you. Next time you pick up a mask, whatever. I'll come. I'll do an uptown run or whatever. You know. I mean, there's people on Twitter that I don't know. Like I know the three of you, and you know your families, this and that. That like they have a sign or they holler my name just and you happen to get my attention, you get it, right? Because I mean that's the thing. When you're on those floats, it's so hard to actually hear anything. It's loud, it's disorienting, it's we've got music going, there's crowds, and the fact that like, Fredo usually gets my attention because he's very tall and I'm always on the bottom. Right? Or like I know like certain hangouts that people are at. Like I know at this block on St. Charles, I'll probably know a bunch of people. So you try to keep oriented to that. But for the most part, I try to give them to people who honestly who aren't looking for it, who aren't begging.
Yeah.
That's not to say like to go out and be a lump on a log, but like
so having a huge net is probably not going to get you.
because also you dealing with women who have had alcohol and various things and think they're good at sports all of a sudden, especially if you've got somebody that's on a tan or on an upper level and they feel like I can play basketball right now. I've gotten some great things by standing in the middle of the neutral ground and women being like, I'm Drew Brees right now and just trying to like hawk things at me. And I have a weird ability to catch, or there's nobody else around me and I can just run over and grab it, and so there's various things in that. But like, I'd say most people don't put things on the float that they're looking to give to people. I'll say one exception was one of my weird praise Satan purses or things I did a couple years ago to where like a guy was like, I want that. Somebody from Twitter, I don't even know who it was. And I was like, you got to come up and you got to ask. Specifically, you have to get my attention and say, I want this. And they did, and they got it. But like, that is a very, like, I make no promises, like it's,
yeah.
Try to get the people, or somebody was like, I'll have a Dratini sign because that's your favorite Pokemon. I was like, all right. And he did. And I, like somehow I put the two and two together. But I don't think there's a trade secret. I think a lot of it's luck. I think, a lot of it's getting someone's attention and making the eye contact. And, if you can do that safely, especially these times, like where it's like, how close do you want to get to somebody else? A witty sign helps. Jennifer's all about the witty signs. But I don't feel like carrying anything around with me, so I don't love a sign myself personally. I just go and like hope my face is cute enough,
When we get off the recording here, I'll tell you about the sign I had made for a parade that we did not get to. Anyway, I'll share that offline. But I want to bring it back full circle to Star Wars before we sign off. Thank you, first of all, for joining us. This has been awesome. I think you've confirmed a lot of things that we've talked about. We take a lot of things for granted because, again, we, like you said, we grew up with them, we've lived with them, we've waited for them, and it was like my perspective with Marvel, watching everything all at once. I've often said, I wonder if, like I said, because I saw Thor 1, 2, and 3, basically back to back.
They don't like sit in your brain.
I'm not over the moon over one, and I liked one better than the other. But I will say I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. I think first of all, save Solo for that rainy day, but start watching Rebels.
That's on Disney Plus.
It's on Disney Plus, and it takes place in between episode 3 and 4. And it's animation. I liked it a lot more than I thought it was, and the animation got a lot better into seasons 3 and 4. But there's only 4 seasons of them, and they're all like about 20 minutes an episode.
That's good, yeah.
So it's like one of those watch when you go to bed type of a thing. It's easy.
Yeah.
Because and it'll be interesting to hear what you think about that. But it will start. It was one of those things. I watched Rebels, and then it made me want to watch the Clone Wars. I had no interest in watching the Clone Wars because it didn't seem to be my thing. Then I ended up. So this is a gateway drug into the Clone Wars.
We all need.
But watch Rebels, and then it might help you with what's to come. We'll just leave it at that. So I suppose, we'll give you a chance once you plug. You guys, you mentioned your photography business and the masks and stuff like that. Plug how people can find you, and if they want to. Go ahead.
JenniferAnn.com. I always tell people it's the most white girl name ever. It's JenniferAnne.com. I still do not know how she snagged that website years ago.
She got her handle. There you go.
That'll kind of take you everywhere. And then Les Cat Nola is where I make Mardi Gras flowers. I think our masks are on there now. And eventually we'll have a lot of other just handcrafted, whatever I feel like making and selling will go to there, and kind of slowly branch that off, obviously, from the photography now that we are back photographing. But yeah, JenniferAnn.com, very, very talented other half that I have.
I will vouch too. Like those Santa photos that we ended up with were just incredible.
Yeah, creative geniuses. I'm not the genius. I'm just the elf, is what she calls me. And I tinker and I do this and that and here and there, and I kind of keep us put together in all the different ways, and we work very well together as a team. I think that's one thing, like back to the pandemic, that I don't think if you were with somebody you didn't want to be with, you're not with them anymore. It definitely, like we always said, like I was really glad that we like genuinely enjoy each other's company, because that's all we saw for a year and a half.
I've said the same thing. But you're being very modest. I've seen some of the shoes that you've teased on social. They're incredible.
I moved them downstairs. They've moved to get bag and tagged.
I think it's about every day or every other day, either Brittany or me are going, "Did you see this shoe that Leslie made?" So
yeah, well, thank you. I think Brittany wants all the shoes. I very much enjoy it, and I'm very glad I got the opportunity to be with this crew, and hopefully can do stuff with them in the future too.
Well, cool. Well, thank you, Leslie, for joining us tonight. Unless anybody has anything else for the good of the order, I think we'll just say who dat.
Who dat.
Who dat.
Everybody have a great week, and parades start this weekend, so have a safe and happy Mardi Gras.
Happy Mardi Gras.
McConkey.